Nepo baby, wrecking ball, Nazi, red alert, castration, war, fight in the streets. What do all these words have in common right now? They've all been used over the past 7 days to describe Elon Musk in the media. And that's where we start tonight. Elon Musk's response to all of that? Priceless. He tweeted on the platform that he owns that he is the Doge father, which means two very important things. One, he doesn't care what Democrats think about him. And two, it doesn't matter what Democrats say anymore. Another example of just how far we've come as a country over the past 2 years. Democrats do not matter anymore. They don't matter anymore, not as people. I know plenty of Democrats, and they're perfectly lovely people. I grew up in Massachusetts. There are many Democrats in my own family, and most of them still talk to me. But when John Fetterman is the voice of reason in your party, clearly something has gone terribly wrong. Fetterman says that Democrats need to stop freaking out over every little thing that Donald Trump does. Translation, pick your battles, Democrats. You don't need to die on every single hill. But they are. Here's an example. Sending Ukrainian fashion students to Paris Fashion Week is not an essential use of U.S. taxpayer dollars. Making sure the Taliban have enough condoms is not an essential use of U.S. taxpayer dollars. $300,000 for diverse bird watchers is not an essential use of U.S. taxpayer dollars. But Democrats are choosing consciously to die on that hill because Democrats as a party do not matter anymore, to the point where when the woman who just 3 months ago got 75 million votes goes to a Lakers game with Doug, who knocked up the nanny, not only does nobody notice, but nobody cares. Could you imagine Donald Trump going to that same Lakers game? The Democratic Party doesn't matter anymore, to the point where one Democratic congresswoman, definitely fresh on her brain, she tried to make the comparison between Donald Trump and the wizard in The Wizard of Oz.
I would always make the comparison to The Wizard of Oz. So, like, it's not just a wicked thing, okay? Understand that authoritarians are kind of like the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. They rely not on their actual power. They rely on their perceived power.
The difference, of course, being that Donald Trump is the president of the United States. But let's just play that out. The Wizard of Oz is a work of fiction, although she might not be aware of that. If Donald Trump is the wizard in The Wizard of Oz, I think we all know who AOC is. And it's not Dorothy. It's not that pesky Tin Man. It's not that cowardly lion. It's the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow, whose only solo song in the original movie is titled If I Only Had a Brain. Although I guess she could also be one of those flying monkeys from The Wizard of Oz, which I think would explain a lot.
Late last year, the White Coat Waste Project exposed more than $10 million in taxpayer funds that were spent creating transgender mice, rats, and monkeys. These DEI grants funded painful and deadly transgender experiments that forced lab animals to undergo invasive surgeries and hormone therapies at universities across the country. For example, the Biden-Harris administration spent $2.5 million taxpayer dollars, $2.5 million taxpayer dollars to study the fertility of transgender mice.
So back to Donald Trump. This week, we haven't seen a Republican with this much sway and power since Teddy Roosevelt, if ever. Even during the Reagan years, Reagan was extremely popular with the American people, but he always had to deal with Tip O'Neill. Tip O'Neill was a Democratic Speaker of the House during the entire 8 years of Reagan's presidency. Reagan always had to deal with Democrats. Donald Trump right now does not have to. He doesn't want to, but he doesn't have to. And just like we talked about last night, the resistance to the president and his policies, it's still out there. After the president signed an executive order banning sex change surgeries on children, Sex and the City actress Cynthia Nixon decided to tell the world at a pro-child mutilation rally in New York City all about her perfectly normal American family.
Most importantly, I am here today as the mother of a proud trans man. Yeah. I am here today as the aunt of a proud trans trans man. My best friend's kid is trans.
Sounds like Cynthia needs to expand her friend group a little bit. Sounds like Cynthia might need to get out of New York City a little bit more often and maybe see how actual, real people live their everyday lives. Of course, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with anything that she just described, but I do think it is relevant to point out that what she just described, a lesbian couple with a trans son who is also the aunt of a trans man, with a best friend who has a trans son, and a trans son whose best friend is also trans. Again, nothing wrong with that, Cynthia. Of course, there's nothing wrong with any of that, but I think it's safe to say that her experience compared to the other 99% of the country are two vastly different things, and the days of all of us adjusting to you are over. That's all. I'm happy for you. I'm happy for your son and everything you just mentioned. This is America. Look, you can do whatever you want. I'm happy for you. I'm happy that you're happy. But the days of all of us bending to the whims of a tiny percentage of the population are over. And the days of 9-year-old boys having their private parts surgically removed are over as well. And the days of men with male parts and beards beating up women in the boxing ring are over. And guess what? The American people are happy that that's over too.
I think these numbers are really illuminating on this topic because I just think there's such a clear trend among the American public. So transgender female athletes in women's sports, only 18% of the country says that they should be, in fact, allowed to participate in women's sports. Compare this to the opposition. I mean, my goodness gracious, 79%. You rarely get 79% of the country to agree on anything, but they do, in fact, agree on the idea of opposing transgender female athletes in women's sports.
Almost 80% of Americans are against men playing in women's sports. They also support ending the insanity of the last 4 years. A Reuters Ipsos poll out yesterday shows that almost 60% of Americans support freezing all U.S.-funded foreign assistance, and we are learning more every single day about what Democrats were spending your money on. You ever wondered why, no matter what the story was, the legacy media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Associated Press, Politico, always defended Joe Biden and always supported Joe Biden? There is a reason for that. The cover-up of the century in the White House, a president with dementia, maybe Alzheimer's, for the last 4 years, and nobody writes about it? Do you think maybe that's a little bit odd? Well, it turns out that Joe Biden really was the big guy after all. USAID was funding thousands of reporters and over 700 different news outlets in over 30 different countries. Newsmax was not on the list, meaning these, quote, news outlets were actually U.S. taxpayer-funded arms of the Biden White House, of the deep state, of the swamp, bought and paid for. And for proof, you just have to look at what they did or didn't do. They always attacked Republicans, with Donald Trump being target number one for a decade. And this would have continued. It would have gotten worse if it wasn't for you, the American people, and what happened 3 months ago on November the 5th. No wonder they tried to kill Donald Trump. They knew that if Trump ever got back to the White House, all of this, decades of corruption would be exposed, and now it is. Let's go to the allegations. Politico getting $34 million from various government agencies. The New York Times reportedly receiving $50 million from various government agencies, including Health and Human Services. The Associated Press reportedly getting $19 million in government contracts. Reuters, a reported $9 million from the Department of Defense. Even the BBC, based in England, was in on the grift, getting $3 million from UX taxpayers. Can anybody explain that to me? And have you ever wondered why taxes keep going up? It's pretty easy to keep up with payroll with taxes the way they are right now. When the government is giving you millions of dollars, you have no problem paying people. I travel in and out of New York City every single day. I pay state and federal taxes in Connecticut. I pay New York state taxes, New York City taxes, surge toll pricing. And where's all that money going? Well, now we know. It was going overseas, and it was going to our media, the left-wing media. It was going to people you never met in countries that you've never heard of. Think about the Boston Tea Party. We went to war with the British over taxes on tea. Donald Trump knows this, and tax cuts are coming.
No tax on tips, which is obviously a very public campaign promise that the president made. No tax on seniors' Social Security. No tax on overtime pay. Renewing President Trump's 2017 middle-class tax cuts, adjusting the SALT cap, eliminate all the special tax breaks for billionaire sports team owners, close the carried interest tax deduction loophole, tax cuts for Made in America products.
We are in the middle of the story of the century. We're in the middle of it right now, and we're only 25 years into the new century.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.